Hello and welcome to the Gonzales Mitchell Show. I'm Clay Mitchell,
And I'm Patrick Gonzales.
and today Patrick and I have a very special guest. It's Dereck Davis. He is the 24th Treasurer of the state of Maryland. He was sworn in December of 2021. In addition to his responsibilities for managing the office of the Treasurer, he also serves on a lot of boards and commissions, including the Constitutional, oh boy, the I got to get my words together here, Mr. Treasurer. The Capital Debt Affordability Committee and the Commission on State Debt, and is a member of the Maryland Board of Estimates, which is an important position. Prior to becoming chairman, Treasurer Davis represented the 25th District of Prince George's County in the Maryland House of Delegates for 27 years. During his tenure there, he chaired the Economic Matters Committee. Treasurer Davis was born in Washington, D.C. He's married, has two grown children, and resides in Mitchellville. That's a good name for a town, Treasurer Davis.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. Those kinds of introductions, they always feel like someone's read at my eulogy or something. So at least I get to know what's
He was such a wonderful fella.
Well, I'd be happy if they say that. But anyway, gentlemen, thank you so much for having me. I, heard a lot about the podcast. I've heard it on occasion. You all do a wonderful job, and it's an honor for me to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, Treasurer Davis, when I first advertised on the internets that you would be on, I had some questions that came in. Why do we have a treasurer and a comptroller? Shouldn't it just be one thing? And I think that people have a misperception about the separate duties that the two offices have. What do you do, and how is it different from, say, Comptroller Lehrman?
That's actually a very good question. We get that a lot. That people, and in fairness, I was going to say, Comptroller Lehrman and our jobs do overlap in a lot of ways. Those boards and commissions you talk about, I serve on. She's on a lot of them, of the same ones as well. So there is a lot of overlap in responsibilities. But essentially, I like to tell people the most simplistic way is she's responsible for money coming in. I'm responsible for money going out. And now to break that down a little further, for example, the Office of the State Treasurer, we're involved with procuring all banking, financial, insurance services for the state. We handle obviously the general obligation bonds. When we're talking AAA ratings, all of that intertwines. The state has a self-insurance program, like most states, or probably all states. So we operate that. Also, the daily receipts that the state's money on a daily basis, which is roughly 20 to 22 billion a day. We're responsible for doing that and reconciling it each and every day. So that's sort of the type of things that the treasurer do, in addition to obviously the one everybody is probably most aware of, Board of Public Works. I would say the comptroller's job, she's the chief financial officer of the state, and that's not just sort of a informal title. It's in our Constitution that position is the chief financial officer. So she's responsible for she's the collector of revenue for the state. She handles information technology services, which was a surprise to me. I thought that would have been, our IT agency do it, but no, she's actually does that. She's the regulator of the state motor fuels. People are aware of that, and as I said earlier, she's on numerous state boards and commission, ex officio, such as myself. So I guess that's a lot of words to say. She's responsible for money coming in, and I'm responsible for money going out.
Now, you mentioned the Board of Public Works, and I think Maryland and maybe one or two other states, but we're really unique that we have this board that is a check and balance on state contracts and procurements and such. That's a very important position to have. There's the treasurer, the comptroller, and the governor on that board. Can you explain your work on that and get into a little bit of detail about what you all are doing now?
Sure, absolutely. Unless my information's incorrect, we are the only state, with the Board of Public Works or something that could be similarly named. That was the Board of Public Works was actually one of the things that really attracted me to the job and made me, apply for it. It's the highest administrative body, that we have. And it's responsible in a nutshell for our procurement, our state contracting. And it's a responsibility that I know myself, the comptroller, and the governor, we take very seriously. It's generally for contracts 200,000 and above. We probably do 400 to 500 million every 2 weeks or so. We normally meet twice a month, that sort of thing. And we're going over those kinds of numbers. And for me, and I'll just speak for myself as how I approach the role. Number one, above everything else, my job is to make sure that the taxpayer is getting full value for his or her dollar. It's above, some of the other things, obviously, businesses, that's part of how they sustain their business, doing our business with the state. There's the MBE program. All of those things are wonderful and are important. But for me, I try to look at each and every one of these contracts, making sure that first and foremost, the taxpayers are getting full value for that dollar. Number two, making sure everyone has the opportunity, a fair opportunity to compete for the state's business, because I do believe in competition, and I'm a Democrat, but I believe in competition. And we're making sure everybody has an opportunity to participate in that. And three, it's about our future and our priorities and so forth. So I want to make sure that those dollars are being spent appropriately, that we aren't paying for things or buying for things that really, we shouldn't be, or it's not on our future. It's a big process. We have a Board of Public Works staff. I don't mean in the treasurer's office, but just generally, there's a separate entity. They go over that. We have liaisons from, my office, the comptroller's office, the governor's office. And so it's an ongoing process. It can get tedious and arduous or whatever at time, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I'll shut up. But I get excited talking about this kind of stuff, which probably has people wondering if that excites him, is something wrong with him. But I know the importance of it to the state, and it's just an awesome responsibility that I've been given, and I try to live up to that each and every day.
And unlike the governor and the comptroller, who are elected statewide by the people, you actually are elected by the House of Delegates to represent the interest of the legislative branch in the
Right.
Board of Public Works.
Right. And so that's always, to be honest with you, Clay, that's always a delicate balancing act for me. Because I wasn't independently elected by the voters, but by the members of the General Assembly, I consider me representing their interests, not necessarily just my own, but I'm doing, their wishes and so forth. So I try to balance between what I'm doing right, or what I think is right, doing what I think is right, and also what I know that they would have me to do. Again, this isn't my seat in the way it is. The governor's seat is his, and the comptroller's is hers. I was appointed by them to be their steward, if you will. So, I stay in contact, obviously, with the presiding officers, particularly on major issues. I definitely want their take, their thought, so that we can act in concert. To their credit, they don't call me and say, do this, do that. They don't do that. But I like I said, I check in with their offices on major issues, because I don't want us to go sideways. A lot of this stuff is policy issues, and they're the policy makers. I'm not. So I work closely with them. All of that to say is I work closely with them.
Patrick, jump in here. Do you have any
Yes.
spending money questions?
Well, no, but the way the treasurer explained the hierarchy or the chain of command, it's as he described it, I think very aptly. He represents the members of the House of Delegates who represent the citizens of Maryland. And it all kind of ties together. That's why we are a republic. And I guess, Mr. Treasurer, the one question I'd like to ask is kind of a broad, general one, and that is from your perspective, how would you describe the fiscal budgetary challenges that are kind of facing the state at this moment as we've head into our second, third week of the 2025 session?
I guess, and that's an excellent question, Patrick. And I'll just be upfront with you. They are challenging, concerning, and difficult. Quite frankly, it's going to be difficult. Yeah, you can't cut and tax your way out of a $3 billion hole that is expected in the out years to get up to $6 billion in the structural deficit. So you're trying to make you have to make hard choices, and you're trying to balance. People still want services, good services, timely services, and needed services, but they are feeling the pinch. We've all heard it. They're feeling the pinch at the grocery store, their utilities, and all the things we heard during the national campaign. Those are very real. We hear those, and I think ironically, Patrick, I think you that did a poll recently, and it's bipartisan that they don't want any more taxes or something akin to that there's concern. So when you're operating under that backdrop, number one, I'm glad I'm no longer a member of the legislature. So I'll start by saying that those are going to be difficult choices. And then I guess an added layer from my perception is, the rating agencies are watching, and I've had difficult conversations with them over the last year, 18 months, with questions that they have, because Maryland's economy has not bounced back in the way that other states' economies have. So we've had those difficult conversations and so forth. And, like when the Key Bridge went down, with all due respect, I know we heard from one of the rating agencies at 7 a.m. It happened, about 1 a.m.
2 in the morning or whatever.
2 in the morning.
Yeah.
They literally, there was a message in my office. They wanted to speak with us, and this was 7 a.m. So, we've got to be mindful of protecting our AAA bond rating. We've had it forever, but one of the things that have always helped Maryland was they liked our qualitative things, like a Board of Public Works or capital debt affordability and Board of Revenue estimates. We have all of those structures and management practices in place that not every state does. And while they won't come out and say it, they know. I think some of the phrases that they use is that we know Maryland will they're not afraid of revenue enhancements and so forth. In other words, we're not afraid of tax. That's generally what they're saying. That being said, there's a lot of concern about the debt that we have. Certainly, our pension, our pension load that we carry, and Maryland, more than most states, we contribute more to local education than your typical state does. So they recognize that we do that, and so there's an understanding there. But nevertheless, we do take a hit for it, if you will. All of that comes on the state's books. So I know I've said a lot there to answer attempt to answer your question, but all of that I'm saying is that this is a very challenging outlook. In my 30 years in Annapolis, I can't recall, things being this difficult. And I've been through some difficult times. But for me, This, in my tenure, this is unprecedented. But I have full faith in the governor and the members of the General Assembly. They'll come up with the right balance between doing what needs to be done, but protecting needed services.
You mentioned the AAA bond rating. That allows the state to borrow money, issue bonds at a much lower interest rate than a lot of the other states. I think we're only a handful of states have the AAA bond rating, and Maryland, as far as I can remember, has had one. And it's something that we need to keep. And you're one of the watchdogs over making sure that we still have that AAA bond rating.
You're right. We've had it one, I think, as far back as 1972. I think one back in the 1940s. But the thing that I would caution everybody is don't take it for granted. You're right. We're one of 13 states, I believe it is. But it's not a birthright. And I as I'm having my conversations, I with them, I see they're starting to switch a little bit from qualitative type things like a BPW, a capital debt affordability. They're switching and they're going more quantitative, which is just raw numbers. The numbers are what they are. And just being blunt about it, a big part of us being able to maintain our AAA bond rating has been because of qualitative things, not necessarily quantitative. So, that's another fiscal reality that if we're going to maintain that, we've got to do better with our, our quantitative ranking factors. But again, we have a good relationship with them. My office brought them down. We invited them down last May. And I had heard that this had been done previously, but it was like more than a decade ago. So I thought it was time that we bring them down, have a face-to-face conversation. The governor and the presiding officers were there. So it gave them an opportunity to hear the vision, but also to ask, some of those tough questions that they wanted to have answers to. So I thought it was a good meeting, but it's a continuing process to to capture the types of things that they're looking for when they rank us. And it's also a good education for me. So as I'm providing information to the General Assembly, I can say, hey, this isn't my opinion. This is what they told me directly. And so it's been useful.
Now, one of the things that you were tasked with, which was a mess, I guess the 5 to 10 years before you were in office, was the 529 plan for tuitions. And your office took that head on and actually turned that program around to one of the top programs in the nation. Could you tell us what that undertaking was like?
Well, first of all, there's an old saying, maybe you guys have heard it about, don't let your mouth write checks your behind can't cash. and I don't know if my ego got in the way or whatever, but being a treasurer, I'm part of the National Association of State Treasurers. And I knew in most states, when I go to the annual conference, that the treasurer's the 529 programs are housed in the treasurer's office. And this was sitting as an independent agency with very little, I would say, guidance or oversight, at least in the way you would get it in a treasurer's office or any agency. And, to be blunt, it was operated not like the billion-dollar entity that it is, but more like a mom and pop kind of deal. Record keeping wasn't up to snuff. And, I couldn't figure out, my team, we couldn't figure out why certain decisions or whatever, because the paperwork wasn't in order. Through all the work that we've done, I'm fairly confident that there was no, malfeasance, theft, that kind of thing. It was just, I don't think people who were in position to lead that office or that agency, they were prepared for the undertaking that, that they had. So moving beyond that, I went to the members of the General Assembly. I mean, I've served with some of them at that point for like 27 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So they knew what I could do. I knew what their expectations were. And I told a few people, this is how it's done in other states. I don't know why I told them, because they had already done the research. They knew it too. So, people want to give me kudos for volunteering for it, but it was coming anyway, as it turned out. So we were on the same page with that. And I can't take credit for it. We had a lot of talented people from various agencies, Office of Attorney General, my staff, some of the people, holdovers from 529. It was literally every day that it usurped a lot of what I had to do, or what my staff was supposed to be doing, because I know what it's like, when you have that political pressure cooker going. All eyes was on us and you're dealing with people and their children that, you don't mess with people and their children.
Sure.
So we knew we had to get that right, and we didn't have a lot of time because they had been going without their money for a long time anyway. So we did a deep dive into it. One of the things I wanted to commit to was that 6% interest that they had been promised, or felt that they had been promised. And so we were able to do that. I hired a young woman, or young to me, I'm an old guy now. Her name's Courtney Finkley Green. Courtney, it was almost by chance. I bumped into her somewhere and we started talking about it. And, she took the initiative, and it was like she had seen the legislation that transferred it to us. So she knew that there was a deputy position that was coming. And she said she would love to help out. And, after I wondered about her sanity a little bit, I was like, all right, well, let's interview. And we talked, and, I knew she was the one. It didn't take much. So she jumped in there, and we cleaned up a lot of things. And I think most people are happy, they were able to get their money, in time for schools, pay for that, or to transfer it into the investment program. But that was one of the more challenging undertakings, because we kept finding, how you think you got something cleaned up, and then you turn over one more rock, and then you're like, oh God.
Yep.
So you got to figure out that. And we could never get to the finish line because we kept finding stuff. But the goal was, again, to make the people whole. And I think by and large, we've done that.
Patrick?
I wanted to thank Treasurer Davis for coming on today. It has been very illuminating. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Patrick.
And I echo that, Treasurer Davis. And I just want to say that I know Courtney Green from political circles, and that's a terrific hire that you have there. And she really did a commendable job there. And your office did too. I know a lot of people in Maryland are very happy that 529 program is back to where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Treasurer Davis, I see by the clock on the wall, it's time for us to say goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Goodbye, Patrick.
Guys, thanks so much for having me.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer
very
Davis.
much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.